Liza Lawrence with episode 36, God's Errand Boy. Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, a wife, mother, teacher, and miracle lover. If you're new to this podcast, this is what we do here. Each week on Miracle Monday, we celebrate awe-inspiring true stories from regular people like you and me. People who have experienced something surprising and wonderful that could be considered the work of a divine source. My desire is to help us recognize God's hand and His love in our lives, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen. Thanks for listening to the show. Now let's celebrate wonders and miracles together. Thomas S. Monson said, "I always want the Lord to know that if He needs an errand run, I will run that errand for Him." Today, husband and wife Jon and Sheree share a life-changing experience they had when Jon was in a near-fatal logging accident. How Jon drove home with a severe brain injury is still a mystery. He has no recollection of the drive. They believe that perhaps it was Kenny, Jon's deceased brother, who guided the truck home. I'm excited for you to hear all the details and the powerful life lessons they both learned from this event. But first, I'm going to give a shout out to the review of the week. This is from Jaden Bratzman. He says, "I've loved this podcast as a way to feel closer to God every day. I love hearing the stories of amazing things that have happened to others, and it helps me have faith that someday, when I need it, I can receive life-changing miracles too, along with all of the other miracles that I can observe every day. If you're thinking of trying this podcast out, you definitely should. Thanks, Liza, for trying to follow your passion and helping others along their separate ways." Thanks for that review, Jaden. If you are enjoying the podcast and want to say thanks, I would love to have you write a review. I'll read it on an episode, and it really does help people find the podcast. The more reviews we have, the higher up in the charts we go. The more people find us, the more stories we have, and it just keeps spreading and growing. My goal is to spread light on the planet and uplift others. So help me do that by writing a review on iTunes and also sharing with your friends and family. I love to give the challenge that just send an episode a week to someone who could use the uplift and need the reminder that God is aware of them and that God is in the details of our lives and that miracles are still happening today. I also want to give another quick plug for the book Hearts of the Fathers by Sheldon Lawrence. This is a beautiful story that takes us on a journey from darkness into light, from pain into the sweet joy of forgiveness. It's inspired by the research of hundreds of near-death experiences. Hearts of the Fathers will truly change how you see this life and the life hereafter. It was one of the most satisfying books I've ever read, so check that one out. It correlates with ancestors on the other side helping each other, and which might be a connection in Jon and Sheree's story here with their brother Kenny. So with no more further ado, let's jump into Jon and Sheree's story today. So I'm here with Jon and Sheree today, and they are going to share a miracle story that happened in 2002, and it was a logging accident. I'm really excited to hear the details of this story. So thank you so much for being willing to share it, and let's hear what happened.
Thank you for the invitation, and we're glad to be here and glad to share our experience with you. I've asked my wife to participate with me because the experience that I'm going to tell you, there were lots of things that I don't remember because of the injuries that I received. Kind of how it all began is that a friend of mine and I were going to the mountains to cut some firewood, and we had planned to meet in a certain canyon, a place that we both knew about, that there was some good opportunity to cut firewood. I drove myself up there, and we were going to meet on the mountain. I was by myself, had a pickup truck with a trailer and my chainsaws, and when I got to the place I thought that we had planned to meet, he wasn't there yet. And so I decided to go ahead and start cutting down some trees in preparation that he get there and we could cut wood together and load our trucks. On the first tree that I was cutting, it was a pretty good diameter tree, bigger than I can wrap my arms around by about twice. I made the first cut and was getting ready to make the fall cut. As I started the sawing of the wood, I noticed that the wind had changed a little bit. I intended for the tree to fall out across the road where it would be easier to get out with the pickup truck, and the wind was blowing 180 degrees the other direction. It wasn't a strong wind, but it was enough that I saw the trunk of the tree shift a little bit. And so I paused the saw for a minute, and I remember thinking, oh, please don't go that way, because that'll just be more work for us to haul the wood back up to the road. And that's kind of all that I remember.
Wow.
To that point. I woke up sometime later in the day, and what woke me up, it was raining just a little bit, so there was rain falling on my face and my head. And I thought to myself, why are you laying here? You came to cut firewood, so quit laying around and get up and go to work. And I got up and I started my saw, and I cut a few pieces of firewood, but I didn't feel very good. And so I shut the saw off and thought, well, maybe I'll just rest here for a little while. And I don't remember what happened until I woke up again. I looked at the wood. I thought to myself, you're not getting very much done. You don't feel very good. Maybe you should just go home. And so I put my saw in the truck, and I'm a fairly good driver, but it was kind of a miracle that I was able to back the truck out of where I was. It was on just a little narrow 2-track, and I was able to back the truck and the trailer out. I got on the road and started off of the mountain. I don't remember anything after I backed the truck out until I got to the Forest Road intersection with the interstate above Spencer, Idaho. And I thought to myself, should I go on the interstate or should I go on the old highway? And I decided to go on the interstate because I knew I wasn't feeling good. And I thought if something happened, people would be able to find me more easily on the interstate than on the old highway. And then I don't remember getting on the interstate. We lived about 15 miles from where I got on the interstate. And the next thing I remember is I pulled into the yard, and I got out of the truck and walked into the back door of the house. All of my children were little. They were school-age kids then, a couple of them preschool. As I walked in the door, I saw their expressions. They all got big eyes and looked scared. And then I started to get sick to my stomach. I started to throw up.
Wow.
And I wasn't feeling very good. And so I kind of walked past them and said, sorry, and where's your mom? And they said that she went to look for you. And I went in the bedroom and laid down.
Wow.
If I'd like to add just a little bit, as he's going through this experience on the mountain, there was several things that happened that I know now were inspiration, that people were being guided. During the day, he had a job where he also shoes horses. And a friend of his called and asked if Jon was home. And I said, no, he's up cutting firewood. And he'd only been gone a couple hours. And his response wasn't, oh, what time will he be back? His response was, do I need to go look for him?
Really?
And I'm like, no, he's only been gone a couple hours, whatever. And about an hour later, I had another phone call from another friend. I'm just calling to visit. And he asked if Jon was home. And I said, no, he's up cutting firewood. And again, he said, well, do I need to go look for him?
Huh.
At this point, I started getting a little nervous, thinking, why is everybody saying this? He hasn't been gone that long.
Just so that everybody knows that it's strange that people were asking about me. The work that I do is I work as a wildlife specialist for the Department of Agriculture. And so I'm in the mountains all of the time by myself anyway. It's not unusual that I was by myself. It wasn't at a predictable time that I usually come home from work. It just depends on how far I go or what happens during the day. So the fact that people were asking if they need to come look for me was unusual, because it's not that I had anything to be home for that day, or I'm not usually on a schedule anyway, like a 9-to-5 type of a work deal. So
it was really, he was about 45 miles from where our home is, just to give you an idea of how far he drove himself out to get himself home. And so at that point, I felt like, okay, maybe I just better go up and check on him. And I went up to check where we had cut firewood a couple weeks previously, which was completely not the right place. But by the time I got back onto the interstate where we could get cell service again, my son called me and said, Mom, Dad's home and his nose is bleeding and he has a black eye. So at that point, I get home and I come in and I notice his black eye. Now, the interesting thing about this is about 3 weeks before this, our daughter, Lindsay, she had fallen out our window in our home when she was playing with clay and pushed the screen out and had landed on her head below and fractured her skull, and it blacked both of her eyes instantly. And so when I saw his eye, I went, oh dear,
Uh-huh.
And I think the next miracle took place when, within just a couple minutes of me taking a step on to our stairs into our home, two members of our church group here in Du Bois showed up, and I hadn't even called the ambulance yet. They had a feeling that they needed to come visit, and they were there to give him a special prayer from our Father in heaven to him to bless him with healing. And the ambulance came, and they were able to get him on the stretcher and get him out the door. We had 5 little kids at home. My neighbors were instantly there to take them and gather them up. In the ambulance on the way down, I was going through all the what ifs as a young mother with 5 kids, as her husband is critically injured in the back of this ambulance, and not knowing what was going to happen. I had a distinct impression and a distinct feeling of comfort come over me as I was told in my heart that everything was going to be okay. It didn't tell me that everything was going to be normal. It didn't tell me that everything was going to be perfect, but everything was going to be okay. And so I was able to take that feeling with me throughout the next several weeks as we dealt with what was to come from his injuries there.
Wow.
So a lot of the things I don't remember because the injuries that I received as a result of the accident. I had a skull fracture that went from my eye around to the back of my head above my left ear.
Wow.
And I had several ruptured blood vessels inside of my brain. And so our bodies kind of go into a self-preservation mode, and I just have amnesia about from the time of the accident until a few weeks afterwards. I do remember my neighbors asking me, though, if I would like to receive a blessing from them, and I agreed to that. I remember getting in the ambulance. I remember a few things as we first got to the hospital. So maybe go back in the story just a little bit. I don't know exactly what happened to me while that tree was being cut down. We can only kind of guess. Probably there was a branch that broke out of the tree, or maybe the top part of the tree, something that fell and hit me on the head. I had a small scrape on my head. I was wearing a ball cap, and it tore my cap, and I had a dislocated shoulder as well.
So I was going to ask you that. So the tree didn't fall. It was maybe something else that fell off.
Well, the tree did fall.
Okay.
It went in the opposite direction that I was trying to get it to go, because in one of the times that I woke up, I cut a few blocks of firewood off. But I don't remember it falling. It just as part of the time I don't.
Yeah, okay.
So that's kind of the experience to getting to the hospital point. I guess as the doctors were working on me and trying to assess what was wrong, and we went through some healing processes, there were probably several other hidden miracles that allowed for Sheree to be there with me, for me to not be injured any worse than I was, and for me to be able to recover from the injuries that I had. It took about a month or maybe a little bit more until I was fairly back to normal. I slept quite a lot during the first couple of weeks after we came from home from the hospital. I would wake up and eat, or wake up and watch TV for a short period of time, and then I just slept, maybe 20, 22 hours of the day.
Wow.
I didn't dream a lot during the sleep time that I had. I did have a couple of, I don't know if they were dream experiences or remembering experiences, but I know that in a few of the times when I was awake and conscious and thinking about stuff, I would apologize for some of the mean things that I had said or the things that I had done that had hurt people's feelings. So I believe that there were some thought processes going on in my head. I don't remember them all specifically, though.
That's interesting.
One of the things that as I was more back to normal, we sat down together as a family. We invited the kids to all share their memories and experiences of it. My mother was able to come up and spend some time with us, and my brother and different family members were able to come and spend some time. When I first was in the hospital, we still weren't sure if I was going to live or if I was going to die, or what state I would be in if I did live, if I'd have normal mental capacity. But as we visited together with the family, one of the things that we felt was a miracle was the fact that I was able to, in the state that I was, be able to drive the truck and get off of the mountain.
That is amazing.
And I have a brother that was about a year older than me, and he was born with a brain tumor when he was born. So most of his life, he was never able to have the capacity to communicate, to control his own functions. He died as a young adult. And it was kind of a neat experience for us. As a family, we kind of all believed that maybe there was some angelic assistance from him and possibly others that helped to guide me in driving the truck home and then and getting myself off of the mountain.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
One of the thoughts that there were several of us that had that in Kenny's life, John's older brother, John had to carry him physically to help him accomplish things here on this earth. And in this experience, Kenny was able to carry John. John's mom wrote a beautiful little kind of memory as she had that sweet impression that Kenny was there. And that was a testimony for all of us to know that God knows who we are and where we are and our circumstances, no matter how good or how bad, and that He's there for us. And sometimes we don't know in what form, or we don't know through whose hands that He worked. I have a testimony that He put Kenny there to help bring John home that day.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. And I'm sure He would be to help his brother, because that is miraculous with the type of injuries that you had to get home 45 miles.
Yeah. And that especially became apparent in the weeks that followed after that. One of the things that went along with my condition is I didn't have self-perception. I wasn't aware of how I looked, how I talked. In my mind, everything was normal. But as I talked to people about my experience after that, they said, "Oh, you weren't normal, friend."
Wow.
I spoke with a pretty strong slur. I walked, leaning to one side, and I dragged a leg. Everything that I did was in slow motion for the first several weeks. I didn't have very good eyesight. My eyes wouldn't connect the same object, so I kind of saw double vision of things. And so knowing that that was the condition that it was hard to walk, hard to talk, hard to feed myself, that I was able to drive a vehicle home.
Yeah.
That miracle kind of even stands out a little bit more.
That is amazing.
And I think it was miraculous that people accepted me. I had my supervisor from work came, and I had some friends that came, and I don't recall their reactions as they met with me in the hospital or in our home, but they were still my friends. They were still my boss. They were just the normal guys. And I was glad to see them. I was like a dog that had been left home, and they came over, and I was happy to see them.
So excited.
Yeah, I'm sure that I looked a mess because my black eye stuck around for a long time, and I talked strange. I walked strange. I probably said things that I shouldn't have. My vocals.
Not probably, he did.
But I guess to me it was a miracle that they were still my friends, that they were concerned about my well-being and wanted to come and check on the family and see how they were, in spite of me being a changed person from who they knew. That was a good experience for me to recognize that people were there to serve my family and to help me in a time that I wasn't able to take care of myself. One of the first experiences that I remember after this, I like to hunt. It's one of the things that I do for recreation hobby. And I got hurt on the day before the opener of one of the seasons that I like to participate in. And it happened on the last day of that same season. My friend took me and we went hunting. And in my mind, we were on some big adventure and we were actually hunting. As I've talked to him in the years since then, he says, "Oh no," he says, "we walked to the snail's pace and you stopped and took a nap every half hour." But in my mind, we were on this wonderful hunt and it was just this great experience. So I'm thankful to have friends like that. And there's probably dozens of other experiences of things that people did for me that I didn't even recognize because of that lack of self-perception.
That's sweet.
I think that now physically I'm fairly normal. I don't have too many lasting things. It did change my personality just a little bit. I don't know if because of the injury or because of the experience, but I guess I believe that I have a purpose for being here on earth. I don't know all of the details of what that is. I think because of this experience and a couple of others that I have had, that God has put me here for a reason. And when I have accomplished the things that He has kept me here to do, then I'll be able to leave this life and hopefully I'll have done well at the things that He's asked me to do. I don't know specifically those things, but I do have confidence that I'm here for a purpose. And I'm working to learn what that purpose is. And I want to serve Him and I want to serve other people. And I don't think that we can repay God for the protections that we get or for the miracles that happen in our lives. But I do think that we have a little bit of a debt to pay, so to speak, for the privileges that He gives us. And this is one for me, that my life was spared, that I was able to share and enjoy some more time with my family, to watch my kids grow up, to be involved in their lives, and with my friends as well. And so I think that in turn, I've tried to live a good life and try to do things that God has asked me to do, and to be a good friend and to be a good father. There's no way you can repay for a life, but it may be a way of showing thanks, I guess.
I think those life-saving experiences do change us. It changes our whole perspective on life and what really matters in life, and to make this life count, which I think does It does change our personality and how we see our whole experience.
Yeah. Before that incident, I was a very competitive person. I participated in sports as a coach and as an athlete in college. And everything I did I was competitive at, even if we were playing Uno with the family or something. I wanted to win.
Uh-huh.
And after this experience, it didn't matter to me. I could win or lose as long as I was able to have an experience and to participate in the playing of the game. The outcome was non-relevant to me. And that was a really big change. That was one of the things that I recognized in myself that it changed, is that I went from being really motivated and competitive about everything to a lot more content and at peace and just glad to be here.
I love that. I want that. That's beautiful.
Well, I hope you don't have to take a bonk on the head to get it.
I know. I meditate. That's what I do. I do a lot of spiritual practice to calm that ego down, that competitive side. That's beautiful. I love that. I think that's a spiritual gift that I don't know if you were given or just that new perspective, but that is really fascinating. That competitive side calmed down.
I don't know what a person that goes through a lobotomy feels like before or after, but I guess I think it was something similar to that there was something that changed in my brain. My personality was just a little bit different on the backside of it than it was before. And things that were important to me before were not as important now.
Yeah.
And I think that enabled him to find and be able to recognize the things of importance that the Lord had for him to do.
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't so focused on the win or the event or whatever, but he was able to recognize the job and the experiences and the things that the Lord wanted him to do and needed him to do.
Yeah. What a gift. Wow. Did the men that came, the neighbors that just had a feeling to come over, did they share anything about why they came over?
Again, it was a similar experience. I think I counted once, there were 5 or 6 different friends of John's. That includes these 2 neighbors that had impressions that something was wrong.
Wow.
So the answer is yes. They had a thought or feeling in their mind, and I believe that they were guided by God to act on things. And the lesson in that for me is that there's sometimes that I get ideas in my head that I think God is trying to ask me to help someone else. And I'm glad that my neighbors and my friends acted on those thoughts that were in their minds. And so the lesson for me is that I need to act on those. And for some unknown reason, God's trying to guide me into someone else's life. And if I'll listen to that and act on those thoughts that are in my mind, then maybe I can be of help or bring blessings to their lives somehow. God's purposes are higher than ours, and we don't see from his perspective. And so there's a saying that President Thomas S. Monson said. He said, if God needs an errand, I want to be his errand boy.
I love that.
I've kind of adopted that philosophy in my life since then, and because of this experience.
That's beautiful.
And I think one thing for me that it made me understand is, and kind of changed my thought process, is so often we think of the Lord's atonement as just a tool for repentance, that we are forgiven through those things, which it is. It is an outstanding gift that was freely given to us. But more so now, I recognize that his atonement is so much more. He suffered and he bled from every pore, not just for our sins, but for our trials and for our hurts and for our sorrows. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that no matter what, I wasn't alone in how I was feeling. I wasn't alone in my experience, because I knew it of at least one, my Savior, who had felt what I had felt and had gone through what I had gone through, and he knew exactly where I was, and he was there to help. So that was a great blessing and a great lesson for me, is to recognize the gift of the atonement as being so much more than what I thought it was before.
Yeah, that's powerful. You were going to meet a friend up there. Did the friend ever come?
He did come to Cutwood. He was even on the same road that I was, but he stopped about a half of a mile before the place that I went to. And he cut firewood and went home and just figured that I didn't come.
Well, when he got home, his friend shared this with me. He'd been up there for about a half hour cutting firewood. And the interesting thing, he'd never heard John saws. And so this was probably the time John's laying on the ground. Uh-huh. But he felt uncomfortable, and he felt like he needed maybe to go home. And when he got home, he called. He was one of them that called me and asked if John was there. And I told him that no, he's up on the mountain. It was then that he realized he needed to maybe do something. And at that time, John was headed back off the mountain.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I read a near-death experience book called The Message. It was years ago that I read this book, but the part that stood out to me, as you were saying, the Lord will give us messages and promptings to help people. And he was dead, and he was in the spirit realm with a spirit guide, and they went to his father, and his spirit guide said, "You need to tell him to check his watch to catch his plane because he needs to come give you a blessing in the hospital." His father was in a meeting and, had lost track of time, but the very son that needed the blessing was there in spirit and prompted his father, "You need to go give me a blessing." And he said, "I watched my father look at his watch and all of a sudden remember and pack up his things and leave." I just think that's fascinating because he himself was there prompting his father with a spirit guide, a being of light, which I think is fascinating too, those blessings that your neighbors offered, that those are necessary as well for our healing, and that power of God can heal us in ways that we don't really understand, but it needs to happen. And so they were prompted to come and offer that to you. I think that's awesome.
Another perspective that I thought about since that time, and I believe that we come to this earth and we had a life experience before we came and were born on earth, and we'll have a life experience that continues beyond the grave and in other forms and other states of life. But for our experience here, we have a veil placed on our mind where we don't remember our life experience before we came here. And that veil is placed upon us because we're required to act in faith in the things that we do. We have to have faith in God. We have to have faith in his plan. We have to have faith in the Savior. And if we knew all the things that happened before or knew all the things that are to come, then that would take away the necessity for faith in our life. It wouldn't be an opportunity to demonstrate our obedience through faith to the commandments that God has given us. I think about my experience where there's so much of it that I don't remember. I wonder if at some time, they may happen after we leave this life and get into a heavenly state, that I will remember what happened and I'll know what I was thinking about. Those things will be brought back to my recollection. And if they'll be significant, if you just shared an experience about someone who had an out-of-body near-death experience, and I may have had those. I don't know if I did. And maybe it doesn't really matter, other than whatever reason God has kept me here for. I still have to act in faith because the answer isn't given to me. And whatever experiences I may have had spiritually during that time that I don't remember are kept from me. And I think they're kept from me for my own benefit.
Yes.
So that I can continue on in whatever mission I'm here to accomplish.
Right. And in your learning and growth and discovery and all of that. A lot of people who do have near-death experiences and remember, they're told that they have a purpose, but they don't remember what it is. And they'll say, "I was even told what it is, and I don't remember it." And so I think that's important that we discover it, that we act in faith. And I think that's one of the purposes of this life experience. And so, yeah, we wouldn't have the same kinds of growth if we knew why we were here, I think. Yeah.
My training as a biologist, I think about the tiny intricacies of life that keep us alive, to make us able to exist and do things. There's such a powerful testimony or witness that there is a God and that he created the things that keep us alive and preserve us. As I was visiting with the doctors during my treatment and afterwards, and we talked about the injuries and what had happened, even the doctors it's just amazing that you're able to survive those. Just matters of millimeters here or there, or some other set of circumstances. It's a fairly common industry for people working in the timber and cutting logs. They call those trees widowmakers because most of the people that have those injuries die from them. So, especially because I wasn't wearing any protective equipment, no hard hats or things like that, that I was fortunate enough to have survived it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Such a beautiful story.
Well, I don't know if it's beautiful or not, but it was something to tell about.
Well, it is beautiful because your life was preserved. And I love that your perspective in life changed, that different things started to matter to you.
Yeah, it taught me a lesson that we're not indestructible. I was still pretty young when that happened, and independent and tough, and thought that I could do anything. And it was a reminder that there is more powerful influences and beings in our existence than us. And we're subject. We have to abide by that. And we can't always bail ourselves out. We have to rely on other people to accomplish the purposes we're here for.
Yeah. So.
Thank you for what you do and for the avenue that you provide for people to share stories, and hopefully that we can all benefit from the discussions that you broadcast out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's one of our jobs, I think, is to edify each other and lift each other, because life can be hard and can feel like a struggle sometimes. And it's nice to hear stories that uplift and go, okay, God's still here with us. He's in the midst of all of us right now.
Yeah. And we thank you for that.
Well, thank you. So good to visit with you guys.
You too. Thanks so much.
Well, that's the show for this week. Thanks for spending this time with me. I hope you were uplifted and edified. I loved how Jon said, if God needs an errand, I want to be his errand boy. I hope you can think of a time in your life where you were God's errand boy or girl and that you were an answer to someone's need. Just a quick reminder to share the podcast with friends and family. Send it to someone who needs an uplift this week. And check out the book Hearts of the Fathers for an uplifting read on family connections, helping each other on the other side of the veil with this journey through life. And if you have a miracle story that you would like to share on the podcast, you can submit that on my website at wondersandmiracles.com, and I will contact you to share the story. And like Thomas S. Monson said, I always want the Lord to know that if he needs an errand run, I will run that errand for him. And as always, remember to notice and celebrate the miracles everywhere, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen